All right, guys, we're going to start part 2 today, and let's make a prediction. What do you think will happen with the tension between Jimmy T and Randolph? Here we go.
Hey, Chief, Jock Dennis said to me as I closed my locker. Hey, I said. What's up? It's all good, Jock said. He was beaming. Randolph is cool. A real center, hey? Yes. He held up his right hand and I high-fived him. Wondering as I did so if Randolph ever high-fived or simply insisted on a gentlemanly handshake. Out on the field, Coach Carson pulled Randolph aside. Mitchell? Coach yelled. Take a snap. I dropped back and yelled. Hike! A perfect spiral snap came whizzing back at me like a bullet. All right, Coach Carson shouted, raising both fists. That surprised all of us. Coach doesn't usually show his feelings. But I understood. I'd love not having to chase balls snapped 4 feet over my head or 6 feet to my left. Jock Dennis sucked at long snaps. Jimmy T showed up just then. He was late, but Coach Carson didn't ball him out. He just sent him over to work with the receivers. Before long, it was obvious that Jimmy T could throw not just long balls and bullets, but also touch passes. For the rest of practice, Coach Carson walked around humming a tune that sounded suspiciously like Happy Days Are Here Again, and then catching himself at it and clamming up. His Long Pond Lumberjacks finally had a chance at a winning season. I wasn't completely convinced. Maybe no one else had seen it, but I could still sense the tension building between Jimmy T and Randolph. The last half hour of practice, Jimmy T was taking snaps from him. They were both so good that they got into a real rhythm after a while. That's the key, you know. That rhythm a center and a quarterback need to make everything come out right. I could tell that they both loved what they were doing so much that they'd forgotten, for the moment at least, whatever bad blood was between them in the past. What worried me, though, was what would occur after practice. But nothing bad happened. They just went to lockers at opposite ends of the room and ignored each other. In fact, after we hit the showers, while Jimmy T was toweling off his long hair, he finally said something to me, even though it was in a guarded voice. Nice job, kicker. Thanks, I replied. It made me feel great to get that praise. For a half a second, I wondered if maybe I should try to start a real conversation with him now. But I left it at that. It was better to hang back. No point in pushing my luck. By the 4th week of school, we'd already had our first 2 games and won them both. I hadn't caught any passes yet, but I'd kicked 11 extra points and 2 field goals, which gives you an idea of just how well the Long Pond Lumberjacks were doing, with Jimmy T as our quarterback and Randolph as our center. Whatever there was between them, they seemed to put it aside as soon as the whistle blew and we ran onto the field. They just concentrated on the game. Concentrating on the game was hard for Jimmy T. His father was a yeller. Different kinds of parents come to high school games. Some cheer a little too much for their kids. Even when they do something dumb, their parents call out, "Great job." Some just sit in the stands, watch politely, and cheer with the crowd. That was how Randolph's mom and dad acted. The worst are the yellers. They don't stay in the stands. They walk up and down as close to the field as they can get. They scream at referees, coaches, other players, and their own kids. Mr. Black was the worst yeller I'd ever seen. He was tall and dark-haired like Jimmy. But he didn't wear his hair long or have Indian jewelry. Maybe he didn't want to call attention to himself at his job. But he surely called attention to himself during our first 2 games. Jimmy hardly ever made a mistake, but the few times he did, Mr. Black bellowed at his son so hard that his face got beet red. "Can't you take a snap?" he shouted, throwing his hat on the ground. Didn't you see that open man? Come on, Jimmy. You're playing like you're asleep. Jimmy tried to ignore it, but I noticed how flushed his face got when his father yelled. By now, I was spending a lot of my time with Randolph. We were both in advanced classes, so we saw each other almost every period. And of course, there was football. I've always had a lot of acquaintances. You know the kind. You pass each other in the hall, give each other the high sign. But I'd never had any close friends my age. Randolph was getting to be one. He even invited me to dinner at his house. Jimmy T, on the other hand, I hardly even saw except on the field. He wasn't in any classes with me. His grades were just high enough to stay eligible for football. I wished I could find the courage to really talk with Jimmy. It seemed to me that maybe he was doing what a lot of Indian kids do, not living up to his potential because he didn't want to play by their rules. But Jimmy seemed to be avoiding me, and I didn't make it a point to seek him out. During that dinner with Randolph's family, I got the shock of my life. After saying grace, Mrs. White turned to me. "Do you speak any Abenaki, Mitchell?" she said. I hadn't expected that. "Some," I said. "My mom's not Indian, but she's been encouraging me to learn more." "That's very good," Mr. White said. "I've always been a race man myself. Young people should be proud of their history, proud of their race." "Plural, dear," Mrs. Randolph said. "Races." Across the table from me, Randolph looked like he was so amused that he was about to bust a gut. Coretta and Rosa were smiling at each other the way twins do when they're thinking exactly the same thing. "Randolph," Mr. White said in a deep voice, "greet your friend in the language of your great-grandparents." "Osi o ogi na li'i," Randolph said in a language I'd never heard before. My mouth couldn't catch up to my mind. "Huh?" was all I could say in return. "That's hello, my friend, in Salage, the Cherokee language," Mrs. White said. "Our family has Cherokee and Choctaw ancestors. Our great-great-grandparents suffered through the Trail of Tears." "In Oklahoma," Mr. White rumbled, "the family name of White Path was shortened to White." "Cherokee hair," Mrs. White said, reaching out to stroke the heads of her two daughters. "Most African Americans," Mr. White said, "have some Indian ancestry. I expect you know that already, Mitchell." I'm afraid most white Americans are not about to accept that fact. Even though Randolph was clicking as Jimmy T's center, there was tension between them. The day it came to a head at practice almost ruined our season. Coach Carson got an emergency call, so he went into the school to take it. We were on our own. I heard Jimmy T say the N-word. It shocked me so much that I turned around to see him staring at Randolph. Randolph was looking back at him. Then Randolph shook his head. "Better than a faker, pal." Jimmy T threw the football right at Randolph. The football thumped off Randolph's chest like a stick bouncing off a drum. It hit Jimmy T in the face, and blood spurted out of his nose. He lunged toward Randolph. I grabbed Jimmy, pinning his arms to his sides. "Stop it," I hissed into his ear, pressing my cheek hard against his and getting my own face smeared with his blood. "You're better than this." The tension went out of him. I slowly let go and stepped back. Jimmy T turned to look into my face. His eyes were filled with tears. "No, I'm not," he whispered. He ran toward the school, holding his bloody nose. Randolph was still rooted to that same spot. "It's okay," Randolph said. I don't blame him. I blame his father. There was no time to find out what he meant just then. Coach Carson came back, and I had to explain how Jimmy T got accidentally hit in the nose by the ball. Later in the locker room, Randolph explained what he'd meant. "His father hates my dad," Randolph said, tying his shoes hard. "He thinks that he should have been the director of the center. He says that the only reason my father got the position was because of affirmative action." Randolph shook his head. Dad won't talk about it. But Mom said he and Mr. Black were friends in graduate school. Now they're enemies who have to work together every day. So, you cool with Jimmy T now? I asked. Cool, Randolph said. Sure enough, in practice the next day, it was like nothing happened. Jimmy didn't apologize to Randolph, but they worked together like a center and a quarterback should. And we kept winning football games. One evening I was filling up my truck with gas at our one local station. It was the old beater Chevy I bought with some of the money I'd earned working summers at the Indian Village. Jimmy T's mother pulled up to the other pump. I'd never seen Mrs. Black at games. She kept to herself and didn't go out much. Rumor was that she was sick. So it surprised me when this puffy-cheeked woman wearing dark eyeshadow got out of her car and came up to me. You Mitchell Sabatis? She said. Yes, ma'am, I said. I'm Iris Black, Jimmy's mother. She was so close to me that I could smell the alcohol on her breath. Her eyes were bright. My dad's eyes used to get like that after a few beers. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Black, I said. She grabbed me so hard by the wrist that I almost dropped the gas cap. You have been so good to my son. You just do not know how important you are to him. He wishes he could be like you. Mrs. Black leaned over and kissed me on my cheek. Then she got in her car and drove off. Those surprises got me thinking about something Uncle Tommy told me. You never can tell what's in someone's heart by the way they look on the outside. What was really in Jimmy T's heart?